Like, why do we do silly things around money? Why don't we do things we should around money? What's going on? And that kind of led me down this path of behavioral science, psychology, just wanting to know more.
So what's the fascination behind, because people are weird about money, aren't they? So what's the fascination behind that? Because they do strange things that in any other walk of life you wouldn't be doing.
Yes, so I think strange things is an interesting way to phrase it, right? Because on one hand, we do things that are genuinely irrational. And by that, I mean they don't align with what we actually care about. So we do things that don't ring true with our values, and we make decisions that actually don't benefit us or put us at a disadvantage, right? That's kind of irrational. The other side of it, and this is where I spend some of my time speaking with advice businesses, is people do things that aren't economically advantageous, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're irrational. Right? It doesn't mean the decisions are stupid. It means that actually they prefer another facet of life. I was speaking to someone day before yesterday, about this idea of compounding. We get obsessed in the profession around compounding, and it's this magical thing. But it's not just money that compounds, it's health and connections, all those sorts of things. And if somebody could invest in an area outside their portfolio now, that compounds. If they can spend the money on training or changing their career, that might compound. So there's this other part to what's seen as kind of irrational behavior by the advice profession, which actually in my mind isn't necessarily irrational. We often optimize for the spreadsheet, right? And that's where there's a disconnect between what clients care about and what the regulator and the profession often care about, or at least put into practice, is that clients don't optimize for the spreadsheet. They optimize for the feelings, the life, their well-being, a sense of satisfaction, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So there's sort of two, kind of a slight nuance there, I guess, which really sort of fascinates me around what we consider being irrational behavior for clients, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, yeah. And so what do you think some of the biggest reasons that people don't engage with financial advice? Because we know that, about 10% of the UK do, and the rest don't. So why is that?
Yeah, I mean, after you account for money, access, all of those kind of things, which is a fair portion, right? The advice, a lot of that is kind of is driven by kind of systemic issues. From a behavioural point of view, the way I think about things is taking financial advice isn't a specific behaviour. You don't just suddenly wake up in the morning right, I'm going to take financial advice, right? And I'm sure I upset lots of financial planners, and I stand up and speak on stage and say, look, no one wants to spend their time with you. They don't wake up in the morning being like, oh, do you know what? I fancy
I'd love
today.
that meeting. I can't wait.
Yeah. Scrap the night out of friends. I'm going to Google financial advisors. So the impact of that is it's actually a process, right? A behavioural process. And there are these different stages of, like any behaviour, we were talking about getting fit earlier, going to the gym, getting fit, eating healthy. There are all these stages you have to go through to be someone who goes to the gym, leads a healthy lifestyle. The same applies to financial advice. So if you think about the first stage that someone has to go through, they have to move from this state of kind of dormancy where they're not even thinking about advice, right? They might be unaware of their problems. They might be not saving enough for retirement, but they have no idea, right? So that's kind of number one. How do you address stage one, moving from a state of kind of dormancy to being sort of weighing up whether they should take advice? Once you've identified their problem, then they're in this kind of weighing part. They're like, should I take advice? What an anxious place to be, right? And if you think about a client who is the ideal client for an advisor, probably, financially comfortable, etc., or could be, but they've probably got loads of challenges, loads of financial challenges, loads of problems. They've probably made a load of kind of shitty financial decisions in their past. They're the ideal client. Well, how does it feel for a client to be told that?
Yeah,
right?
awful.
To have that highlighted, awful. Hence this kind of, this aversion we have to change, and why we stick with what we're doing and bury our heads in the sand. So you've got things like trust. I talk about the 3 E's. So emotions, effort, economics drive our behaviour. So if you think about someone, they're the emotions. I'm going to feel like an idiot if my financial planner says, why have you done that with your money? Why have you made these poor decisions? Why have you tried to DIY invest and actually you've lost a load of money, or whatever it might look like? So you've got this barrier then when someone's weighing up to engage in advice to them being able to actually do it, to be willing to do it. So once they're willing, that's where this action gap comes in, this intention action gap. They can have their best intentions, right? They can be willing to take advice and think like, yeah, I've done it. And this is where, from a planner's point of view, people have seen this before, right? They're sitting in a meeting, discovery meeting, it's gone fantastically, and then people procrastinate.
Yeah.
And they're like, what is going on? They say, yeah, I'm going to engage. And then something happens, this intention action gap, something happens in the meantime, which they don't overcome, and they end up reverting to where they were. So you've got these kind of, as a behaviour of engaging with financial advice, i.e. signing a client agreement, actually getting advice, there are a few different hurdles that in practice people have to overcome. And if we think about emotions, effort, economics, there are umpteen influences at every stage that we need to plan for, right? We need to design the client's experience, the prospect experience to help people overcome those. It doesn't just happen by accident, unfortunately.